Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I'm back with more Battlytics. I wanted to dive into some mechs from those relatively new Davian Force packs. So tonight, we're going to look at the Falconer. Now, this thing was basically designed, or at least asked for, by Hans Davian himself. Some people say Davian. I say Davian. I don't know. You tell me. Leave it in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong about how cool this mech is. I will tell you that. So this is an excellent, excellent new resculpt, which is what inspired me to do this Battlytics. I was excited to check it out. So the one we're going to look at tonight is the FLC-9R Falconer. This one has a battle value of 1979. It's not cheap, but it was designed to be able to take on Omnimechs one-on-one. That was the original Falconer. I think the 8R. The 9R is a later era refit with some juicy new technology. Now, what's really cool about this mech is the movement profile. So 75 tons, it is a 5.85 movement profile. So it gets up and goes. It can jump. I mean, it can hang with a lot of much smaller mechs, but still brings tons of firepower to the table. It does have an XL fusion engine, standard gyro, standard cockpit, endosteel structure, standard armor. Now, it has 11.5 tons of armor, which does not look terrific. It's sub 80% total coverage, but looking at the armor diagram in the center, it has pretty good coverage on the torso, but is pretty light on the legs. I'm very interested to see how that shakes out in the defensive simulations. Let's talk about the weapon loadout. So it's got a heavy PPC, which is like a clan PPC, but a lot more heat. It's got an LB-10X autocannon, which is one of my favorite weapons in the game. And it's got 2 medium lasers, 2 on the left torso, 2 on the right torso. And before you flame me in the comments, yes, I'm aware the heavy PPC has less range than the ER PPC of the clan variety. I'm talking about in terms of damage output. The heavy PPC is on par with it. So it's very, very powerful, 15-point slap. Pretty good overall. Now, mech has ammunition in the right torso only. There is no case, which is weird, but it is what it is. So, curious to see how this thing stacks up. It's got a lot of weapons I like. It's got a really good movement profile, weird armor, weird defensive capabilities. But let's see, guys, analysis of the Falconer coming right up. All right, we're back. Let's take a look at some offensive benchmarks to start. So, looking at the average calculated damage, what do I see here? So, clearly this thing is capable of building up some heat. So, one thing I failed to mention, this thing has a heat dissipation of 22, so that's 11 double heat sinks. The weapons clearly can overload that without a problem. So, that's a good thing because we can always squeeze it for some more damage when we need. Obviously, the closer you get, the better this thing does. Once you clip over that 9-inch range, you get all 4 medium lasers in play. You can use those. Those are great weapons. Cumulative benchmark. Let's talk about this. So this thing managed to do 192.36 points of damage, rounded up to 192.4 on our optimized benchmark. All right, so that's where we squeeze it for a little bit of heat. Now, this wasn't really a staggeringly good number. The Timberwolf, for example, which is a mech that you would imagine it was built to go up against, does 278 points of damage in this benchmark. So 192 though is better than a 3025 era awesome or maybe an Atlas, things along those lines. But it's really nowhere near competing with clan technology. Despite House Davian's hopes and dreams. Let's take a look at the lethality index. Now, the cool thing about this is damage per hit. It's basically slapping, on average, 10 points every hit. It's got great damage coming from, obviously, its lasers at 5 a pop. The LB-10X is a phenomenal weapon, and then that heavy PPC as well. Criticals, 2.99. So what's great is you do have 6 gun barrels, so if you wanted to go haywire and build up some heat, you do have 6 opportunities to generate critical hits. that was just about average. 3 is about our average number. Time to kill against the Javelin was astronomical, 8.63. So normally we see about 10. What was interesting and why I say it's astronomical is because the damage was so low, I expected the time to kill to be around average, around 10. But this was actually significantly less. Another thing to take into account here with the data is that it only killed the Javelin 98.5% of the time. Most mechs usually make it to 100% at this tonnage. So it's kind of interesting. This thing does sort of feel like it's shaping up to be a boom or bust mech. Like if it gets the right damage in the right spots, you can really wreck things pretty quickly. But if you get unlucky with the dice and you're scattering all over the place with your damage, not so great. This is like a mech maybe that I would pair up with something that had a lot of SRMs or a lot of LRMs, because it can just poke holes in it with the big guns. You don't have to worry about overheating with the medium lasers. You can keep those as sort of backup weapons, and then you can just let somebody rain LRMs in and find those criticals for you. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get to the defensive benchmark. This is going to be very interesting. All right, so here we are. So we looked at the armor diagram earlier. We saw great coverage on the torsos, not so great coverage, but not terrible on the legs. The back is about where I want it to be. Arms probably could use a little bit more armor, considering they're carrying the most, valuable weapons that this mech has. But let's take a look at the mobility analysis. Did very, very, very well. Only 1.6% of the time it was seeing a motive hit. And jump over the survivability, 89.8%. That's very, very high for its mech of its battle value. If we look at that area chart next to the survivability donut chart, you'll see this thing is outperforming its peers. I have to attribute all of this to the speed. I think you would too. But that pays dividends because we see a low number of engine deaths, low number of ammunition deaths, just low number of deaths overall. Usually mechs with XL engines and weak armor, you tend to see much higher death rates, but this thing doing very, very well. And I would imagine if you kept it at further range, right, in this simulation, the benchmark, right, it's getting perpetually closer and closer and closer. If you kept this thing at range, it would perform even better, because if you look at the survivability curve, the deaths really aren't coming on very strong until around turn 10, right, where it's basically, I think it's at 9 inches or 5 inches actually at that turn. So keep this thing at range, use that heavy PPC, that LBX. I think they both have the same range profile, if I'm not mistaken. They can shoot out to 18 hexes, 18 inches. So food for thought there. But overall, the defensive simulation is much better than I expected, with only 79% armor coverage. Survivability, very, very good. Just goes to show you, speed is life, as they say. But not so great damage, great survivability. How does it come together? Let's take a look at the efficiency. Here it is. So we're at 6.67. It's not terrible. It is on the correct side of that bell curve. It's a little bit better than average. It's not bad by any means, but it's not blowing the doors off anything. I think, as we've discussed, the sort of the data points, sort of shaping how to use this mech and how to get the most mileage out of it. If you used it as sort of a jack of all trades, you would hit that 6.6. But I think if you used it more in like a sniping fire support type role, you might actually get more mileage out of it. Actually, even like a skirmisher. Again, I'm jumping ahead, but I think like a hit and run type style with this mech could be very, very good. As you can see in the top left, the efficiency analysis, because the survivability is so good, there's a very, very, very small amount of damage lost, only 3.9% from our optimized, right? So that's a good thing, and that's because the deaths are coming on very late in the survivability curve, and that's what you want. Gunnery sensitivity, it was 0.6, not bad. If you ran this thing at gunnery 0, you'd get a 7.5 out of it. If you ran it at gunnery 4, it'd be a 5.1. Average gunnery sensitivity is about a 0.77 or so. This is lower than that, which means it's less sensitive. I don't know. Overall, I would probably run this thing at gunnery 3 or gunnery 2. If you plan on keeping it more at long range, I think gunnery 2 is where it's at. But speaking of which, let's get right into roles, because that's what I'm excited to talk about. All right, so let's talk about it. 3 roles I picked for this thing: Defender, Fire Support, and Skirmisher. I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. So for a defensive situation, this mech has terrific survivability. It does have decent range, right? 18 inches. You can get out and around the objective. It's fast enough to kind of get out a little bit and then get back if you need to be within like certain range of the objective, or if you need to head off, a different flank or whatever. The thing has the speed to move to get to where you need it. It has the armor to survive, and it has scary enough weapons that even though it's not doing lots and lots of damage over time, just the big chunks, the 10, the 15 coming out of this mech are, I think, scary enough to turn some heads. So I like it in that defensive role. Certainly light mechs that try to sneak in very quickly, you can use your jump jets to outmaneuver them or put yourself in an optimum fire position. I mean, you hit anything, 25 tons or less with a heavy PPC, they're going to be feeling it in the morning. So that's the first role. Second role, we talked about fire support. I sort of waffled on second line or fire support because, you do want to get this thing in, right? Because it's got 4 medium lasers. That's very, very useful. But ultimately, I opted on fire support because, again, if we want to keep this thing alive and you want to just min-max it, I think fire support could be really, really good for this. But, somewhere between fire support and second line, because it does have the speed to close the gap very, very quickly. But really, I think it would shine in a skirmisher role, right? A hit and fade. You can use terrain to your advantage. Heavy woods, light woods, mountains, whatever you need, elevation changes. You have the jump jets to negotiate it. You can get yourself in optimal firing positions, and you can really wreck shop with, again, 2 very big damage weapons that have very solid range profiles. And if you jump and you fire the heavy PPC and the LBX, your heat management is going to be easy, right? You're not going to be overtaxed doing that. So I really like it in that sort of hit and fade role. When I look at the model and I think about the mech, I would have guessed, man, front line, get this thing in somebody's face. It's got big guns. It's got medium lasers. But really, the numbers tell me something very, very different. They tell a different story. So interested to know if you've used this Falconer and, how that has worked out for you. Now, the other Falconer, the 8R, looking this guy up, what does this thing have? This has a Gauss rifle, an ERPPC, and 4 medium lasers. So it's interesting because I think the ERPPC does 10 damage, if I'm not mistaken. The Gauss rifle does 15. But both of these things, yeah, that's very funny. That's basically the same damage profile. Range, though, it's doing a little bit better. The ERPPC and the Gauss rifle definitely doing much better in that range category. That's interesting. So, does it have the same movement profile? We should do a shootout between the 2 Falconers, guys. What do you think? Let's see. I'm going to look it up right now. How fast does the stock one move? Oh, yeah, 5.8. Does it jump? It does. So both of them are 5.85s. One has a Gauss rifle and an RPPC. This one has a heavy PPC and an LB-10X. I mean, the only thing is this one does have that cluster shot, capability. So if you do poke a big hole in somebody with your heavy PPC and you're trying to find that last critical, you could buckshot with your cluster rounds. That's kind of cool. But yeah, it's interesting. These Falconers are not very different. They have the same lasers too. Fun fact, we learned something about 2 Falconers today. Tell me which one's your favorite. Tell me how much you love the new sculpt. Tell me what you thought about this analysis. I want to hear about it. Leave it all in the comments. That said, I am going to wrap this one up though, guys. A couple of things. If you want to get yourself some House Davian/Davian Force Packs, you can head on over to Ares Games and Minis. That's my one-stop shop for all things gaming related. They got tremendous stuff over there. Dice, books, 3D printed, terrain, obviously all the Battletech stuff. So very, very cool. That said, if you want to help out the channel, you can head on over to Patreon. It's as little as $2 a month. You can also join as a free member, get some access to some neat things. But of course, thank you to all of our patrons for keeping the lights on and the cameras rolling. And if you don't want to become a patron, that's okay. Like the video, share it around, leave a comment, tell your friends about Battletech. That's the best thing that you could do, and that costs nothing. So that said, guys, hope you enjoyed this analysis of the Falconer. I'm all wrapped up. Thank you so much for watching, and of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.